James Parker stood at the edge of his newly acquired cliffside property, the salty winds tousling his hair as the afternoon sun glimmered on the ocean below. Waves crashed rhythmically against the rocks, their soothing melody a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that had led him here. After months of relentless house hunting, this was it, his dream home. "I can't believe this is mine," he muttered, wonder spilling over as he took in the panoramic view of the vast, azure ocean. The cliffs gave a grand embrace, and the solitude felt rejuvenating. Having lived in cramped apartments with neighbors who invaded his peace, James had long fantasized about finding a sanctuary nestled in nature, untouched by bureaucracy and judgment. No homeowners association to dictate color codes or frown upon his garden choices. Just freedom. Moments later, the real estate agent, Sarah, arrived, a warm grin illuminating her face. "You made a brilliant choice, James. This place is special." Thanks, Sarah," he replied, enthusiasm bubbling within him. It's everything I hoped for. I can already imagine quiet evenings with a book, a glass of wine, and that beautiful view." Together, they walked through the weathered doorway into the cozy living room. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, illuminating the rustic wooden beams that framed the ceiling. Each space resonated with untold stories and dreams waiting to unfold. The heart that had once felt heavy now thumped with possibility. But beneath the excitement lurked clouds of uncertainty. "Are there any HOA rules I need to worry about?" he asked, biting his lip in concern. "None," Sarah replied confidently, shaking her head. "This property is outside any jurisdiction. You're entirely free to do as you please. That's part of its charm." James exhaled deeply, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Great! I can finally live my life without restrictions." As he signed the final documents later that day, James felt a surge of hope. This was the beginning of a new chapter. He could already sense the fresh air washing away the stress of city life. It felt like he had finally taken control of his destiny, trading the confines of ordinary living for the embrace of freedom. Days turned into weeks, and James's life blossomed in his new home. He painted the front door a vibrant teal that matched the surrounding sea and planted a variety of flowers, creating a colorful explosion that danced in the wind. Friends visited for barbecues under burning sunsets, laughter resonating across his cliffside paradise. All felt right. But just as he thought he had finally escaped the mundane, a white envelope arrived, its weight sending a shiver down his spine. The return address bore the name of the Homeowners Association. Confused, he gripped the paper tightly, skepticism coursing through him. "No way," he whispered, shaking his head as he ripped it open. The words leaped off the page, accusatory and threatening, claiming he was obstructing the ocean view for neighboring houses below. This must be a mistake," he gasped, his heart racing. How could my two-story house block someone's view?" He immediately dialed Sarah, urgency pulsating through his voice. "Sarah! What the hell is this? I thought there were no HOA rules." "I'm as shocked as you are, James," she replied, her voice steady yet tinged with disbelief. "I assure you, there must be some sort of misunderstanding. I'll get to the bottom of this. Let's meet as soon as possible." As they hung up, a sense of betrayal washed over him. He had trusted the process, believed he had found a sanctuary, only to be plunged into a nightmare of legal threats. It felt like fate was mocking him, turning a dream into a colossal mess. In the depths of his growing despair, anger sparked. James had fought so hard to take control of his life, it was time to fight for this home, the last bastion of independence he had hoped to build. That night, he tossed and turned, insomnia gripping him like a clammy vice. Doubt slithered around his mind as he stared at the ceiling, thinking about every single conversation he had had with Sarah, replaying the beautiful moments in the house that now felt tainted. How could something so right go so wrong so quickly? When dawn finally broke, golden rays spilled into his room, illuminating the turmoil etched on his face. It was time to gather his thoughts and confront the looming uncertainties. James knew he had to take a step back, gather his bearings, and fight to defend not just his home but his right to live freely. As he stepped out onto his porch, gazing at the horizon filled with possibilities, he made a decision. I won't let them take this from me, he vowed to himself, feeling the strength rising within him. This is my home, and I'm ready to stand my ground. Little did he know that this was just the beginning of a battle that would challenge everything he thought he knew about freedom, homeownership, and the price of holding on to one's dreams. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when James sprung out of bed, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Fueled by a mix of anxiety and determination, he grabbed a notepad and began jotting down everything he needed to do: research the HOA, gather evidence, contact a lawyer. With each stroke of his pen, his resolve solidified. He wouldn't be a victim in this scenario. He would fight, not only for himself but for the dreams of freedom that lay within the walls of his beloved home. By mid-morning, he had pored over the HOA's bylaws and regulations, piecing together the knotty threads that tied him to the oppressive organization. His research brought forth a disheartening realization: his property was part of a gray area, once linked to an older development that had operated under the HOA's rules before being sold off like a ghost of its past. Though he had been assured multiple times that he was free from such constraints, the remnants of those rules lingered like a shadow. James, the history of the land can often be convoluted, Sarah said, her voice crackling through the phone as she lent him her expertise over the line. It's vital to dig deeper, especially when it comes to older properties. We need to see how the HOA may still have influence. He could hear the urgency in her voice, mirroring his own mounting dread. So, they can just come after me for a house I thought was mine? He barked incredulously, frustration boiling over. Unfortunately, yes, Sarah replied softly. But we'll fight this. We'll find a way to prove you are within your rights to enjoy your home. After their call, James sat in his living room, his palms clenched into fists on his knees. He could hear the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore, which usually would have calmed him, but now that sound was laced with an unsettling tension. Every creak and groan of the cottage felt like it echoed the mounting pressure of the situation. With a sigh, he pulled out his laptop to begin a search for a lawyer specializing in real estate disputes. The hours ticked by as he combed through different local law firms, accumulating names and numbers. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard when he heard a knock on the door. Startled from his focus, James opened it to find a warm smile belonging to Mrs. Thompson, the kindly neighbor from next door holding a basket filled with homemade cookies. Hi, dear. Thought I'd bring you a little treat for settling in, she said, her eyes sparkling with genuine kindness. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That's really thoughtful. James gestured for her to enter, grateful for the distraction from his growing worries. As they settled into the kitchen, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more substantial lay beneath their small talk about the community and its charms. The cookies sat untouched, barely registering on his palate as he struggled with how to voice his creeping misgivings. Is everything all right? Mrs. Thompson asked, concern creeping into her tone. You seem a bit on edge. James hesitated but ultimately decided that sharing his burdens could ease the weight. The HOA is suing me for blocking someone's view, he confessed, his voice laced with an amalgam of anger and disbelief. Her expression transformed from concern to understanding. Them again, she sighed, shaking her head. They've been a headache for many in this community. They don't like change, you see. I've heard of their tactics before, trying to push people around, to keep things uniform. A headache is certainly one way to put it, James replied, his heart pounding. It's unbelievable. I thought I was finally free from all of that. Mrs. Thompson leaned in closer, her voice lowered. I've been around for a while, James. Sometimes, the best way to fight back is to rally others. A collective voice can be much stronger than one alone. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. You think there are others? Absolutely, she answered with conviction. I know a few neighbors who have been eyeing the HOA, and many share your frustrations. I'd be happy to introduce you to them. You're not alone in this. Mrs. Thompson, that would be amazing, James replied, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. We could come together, show them they can't intimidate us. Exactly, she nodded, a grin spreading across her face. You have rights, and sometimes it takes a community to remind them of that. Their conversation undeniably rekindled an ember of defiance, igniting a spark that propelled James into action. As they shared stories over the cookies, he felt renewed strength within him. This wasn't just a battle for his home, it was a fight for everyone who had ever felt oppressed or outcast. In the following days, with a renewed sense of purpose, James organized a meeting at his cottage. He emailed all the neighbors he felt could relate to his plight, arranging for them to gather under the banner of shared purpose. On the day of the meeting, nervous energy permeated the air. As neighbors filtered into his home, familiar faces he had learned about from casual encounters, he summed up his courage and introduced himself. Thank you all for coming. I know we don't know each other well yet, but we all have one thing in common: we love this community. And for too long, the HOA has been dictating how we should live our lives. We need to come together to take a stand. The murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, emboldening him further. An elderly woman with silver hair piped up, "I've had my issues with them too, young man. It's about time someone had the spirit to push back." As discussions flowed, frustrations merged into a chorus of indignation, empowering every voice in the room. They strategized how to combine their experiences and rally their community to recognize the power they held against the HOA's tyranny. When we unite, we can craft a better future for ourselves, James declared, handing out flyers that outlined their collective grievances and planned next steps. Let's show the HOA that we won't back down. And as laughter filled his cottage and hope blossomed anew, James realized that he was no longer solitary in his battle. He was surrounded by a band of allies ready to reclaim their homes and their lives. With purpose fueling his every step, he could already feel the winds of change in the air. A storm brewed on the horizon, and he stood ready to meet it head-on. With purpose fueling his every step, he could already feel the winds of change in the air. A storm brewed on the horizon, and he stood ready to meet it head-on. The weeks that followed the meeting unfolded in a whirlwind of activity and camaraderie. Together, James and his newfound allies began to build a community united against the oppressive grip of the Homeowners Association. Each evening after work, he shared laughter and frustration with neighbors over pots of coffee, working tirelessly to craft a strategy to confront the HOA. Their first step involved gathering testimonies from all those who had faced similar grievances. They crafted a collective letter addressing the HOA, voicing their concerns over the board's heavy-handed tactics and the importance of individual expression within their homes. The more stories they collected, like the elderly couple forced to paint their front door a drab color or the young family punished for their garden's eclectic flair, the more James felt the stirrings of real change. On a particularly sunny Saturday morning, the group met in the park, a small but cherished plot of land flanked by white picket fences and blooming dogwoods, a symbol of the community they wished to preserve. Sitting in a circle on the grass, James began to sense a shift in the atmosphere. The laughter and camaraderie felt like an electric current, binding them together as they discussed how to present their case at the upcoming HOA meeting. We must be organized, James emphasized, his eyes sweeping across the group. I want everyone here to be aware of all the facts. This isn't about a door color, it's about our rights to live freely in our own homes. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, hopeful faces nodding in sync. A soft-spoken man named Robert, who had always been intimidated by the HOA's power, chimed in, maybe we can create a petition to show the board that we have significant support within the community. Numbers can make a difference. James nodded enthusiastically. That's an excellent idea, Robert. We can collect signatures and circulate it to all residents. It'll show the HOA they can't stifle our voices. The more people we engage, the stronger we'll be. As they brainstormed ideas, James felt a warmth unfolding inside him. It was exhilarating to collaborate with others in pursuit of a common goal. He hadn't felt this alive in years. Their drive pulsed through the air, uniting them against an unseen enemy. But in the midst of their organizing, anxiety brewed beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the impending HOA confrontation. The date of the meeting loomed like a flash of thunder on a calm day. As they gathered together in the days leading to the event, James sensed apprehension creeping into the hearts of his friends. We have a chance to make a bold stand, he called out during one of their sessions, determination radiating off him. We'll go in well prepared, armed with facts, and ready to show them that we won't allow our lives to be dictated. However, as the meeting day drew closer, doubt crept back into his mind. In the darkness of his thoughts, he could hear the voice of the HOA president echoing in his head, pointing out every flaw in his arguments and dismissing them as mere whims. Fear snaked through his resolve. What if they laughed them off? What if they didn't take them seriously? On the night before the meeting, restless and anxious, James couldn't sleep. He paced back and forth in his living room, staring out at the tumultuous ocean waves crashing violently against the cliffs. It felt symbolic of the internal conflict warring within him. He needed to remember the strength of the community behind him. He took a deep breath, hoping the timing of his thoughts would match the tide that was forming outside. Suddenly, a quiet knock echoed through the cottage. It was Sarah, his real estate agent. Surprised and relieved, he opened the door to find her standing there, offering a reassuring smile. James, I hope I'm not intruding," she said gently. "No, not at all. I'm glad you're here," he replied, letting her inside. "I could use some advice." "I felt the need to check on you," she confessed, her gaze steady. "I know how overwhelming this can feel, but you've already accomplished so much. The fact that you've inspired a community to stand up is no small feat. Honestly, I'm scared, Sarah. What if they dismiss us? What if they laugh?" His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, vulnerability creeping in. "They might try to belittle you," as she replied, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "But think about what you've done. You've brought people together, people who were once afraid to voice their opinions. That's powerful. You have a community standing behind you." The reassurance in Sarah's words sent a wave of calm through him. He glanced out at the ocean again, realizing that its violent waves could transform into gentle ripples over time. "I guess I never thought I'd have this kind of support," he said, the tension easing in his shoulders. "Ride that wave, James. This is your moment to make a difference." As the night faded into dawn, James felt a renewed determination swell within him. He would not allow the HOA to intimidate him or his friends. They would confront the board, ready to voice their grievances boldly, with facts in hand and hearts united. The day of the meeting arrived, a palpable energy swirling in the air as neighbors gathered at the community center. Tension crackled, but James could see that they were by no means alone. Each familiar face reflected a shared resolve that surged through the room, their collective heartbeat echoing in unison against the walls. James stood before his neighbors, a determined fire igniting in his chest. "We're here today to remind the HOA that our homes are not just properties, they are our sanctuaries. They should not dictate who we are or how we live." Courage surged, and the fear that had once threatened to overwhelm him began to recede. He was ready to fight for not just his dream, but for the very essence of community freedom. As he faced the board, an unwavering belief in the strength of unity anchored him to the ground, pushing him ever closer to turning the tide in this battle for their rights. As he faced the board, an unwavering belief in the strength of unity anchored him to the ground, pushing him ever closer to turning the tide in this battle for their rights. The meeting room buzzed with energy, filled with friends and neighbors who had gathered to show their support, bolstering his resolve. James squared his shoulders, glancing around at the downturned faces of the HOA board members. Thank you for allowing us to speak today," he began, his voice steady but passionate. "We, the residents of Crescent Cove, have come together because we believe in the right to determine how we live our lives in our homes. An HOA should foster community, not suppress individuality." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, rekindling the fire within him. Many of us have faced unnecessary scrutiny over minor issues that should have no bearing on our enjoyment of our properties. He gestured towards Robert, who stood to his left. "We've been told to paint our doors bland colors, and we've been harassed for planting flowers of our choice. If the community is a garden, don't you think each of us should have the right to plant according to our tastes?" James' statement struck a chord, eliciting a wave of nods and murmurs of encouragement among the residents. He felt invigorated, and the veins of anxiety that had seared him moments before began to trickle away. The HOA president, a stern man with thinning hair and a pinched expression, leaned slightly forward, attempting to regain authority. Mr. Parker, while we appreciate your enthusiasm, the HOA exists to maintain property values and aesthetic standards. It's essential to keep the charm of Crescent Cove intact. A charm should never come at the cost of our freedom, James shot back, his heart racing. We are not asking for complete anarchy, we're asking for dialogue. We want to contribute to the community, not be dictated to by a narrow view of what that community should look like. Look around, how can a thriving neighborhood be restricted to monotonous sameness? He watched as the shock rippled across the board members' faces, the uneasy shuffling of papers apparent. A few board members exchanged glances, and for the first time, cracks appeared in their steadfast demeanor. Together, we submitted a petition, James continued, his voice rising as he pointed to a large stack of papers one of his neighbors held. We collected signatures from over 70 households. That's over half of the residents in Crescent Cove. Today we're here to ask, what does it mean to be a part of this community? If we can't express ourselves, are we not just living in a prison of conformity? The crowd erupted in applause, their shared frustration crystallizing into unified energy. James felt palpably lighter as he stood witnessing their gathered strength, the transformations from helpless individuals into a formidable collective of voices. The tide had truly begun to shift. In the corner, a feeble voice broke through the noise. It was Mrs. Thompson, her voice trembling with age but resonating with hope. I lived here long before this HOA was formed. I loved my home and painted it the colors I saw fit. Can we not find a way to celebrate our differences while maintaining respect for one another? I've always believed that a neighborhood isn't just about the houses but the hearts within them. Exactly, James chimed in, feeling emboldened. We're not here to disrupt but to enhance this community. Together we can establish guidelines that adopt an inclusive approach, blending individuality while protecting property standards, something everyone can agree upon. There were nods of agreement among the audience, but the board members attempted to maintain their air of authority. This is not part of a formal agenda, the president declared, impatience creeping into his tone. But it needs to be addressed, James countered. Every day, we have been subject to rules that don't resonate with us, and it's time to change that. The tension hung in the air, a taut string waiting for a resolution, and James could feel the collective energy of the crowd at his back. He had never expected this fight to draw out so many hidden resentments and longings. The atmosphere shifted as members of the board exchanged a glance, an inkling of weariness settling within them. Their unyielding stance began to waver, undermined by the sea of unity at the front. Finally, the HOA president cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. While I cannot promise anything today, I am open to discussing this matter further with the board. Maybe we need to reassess our guidelines and how we communicate with residents. Applause erupted around the room, and James could barely contain his sense of triumph. They had won the first round, opening the door to change, albeit cautiously. As they filed out of the room, exhilaration and relief coursed through him. James felt invigorated. The battle had been intense, but what mattered was that they had finally made their voices heard. In the following weeks, change became tangible within Crescent Cove. The HOA engaged in discussions with James and other community members, seeking inclusive guidelines that struck a balance between individuality and property standards. The synergy built through their shared struggle transformed them into allies, proving that community could flourish when respect and cooperation were modeled. On a sunny afternoon, James stood on his porch, gazing at his newly painted teal door. The laughter of neighbors echoed through the air, a reminder of how far they had come. His once lonely haven had become a place of connection and power, a true sanctuary of home and community. As he took a deep breath, the salty ocean breeze washed over him, soothing his spirit. He realized that sometimes the best victories are not just over adversity but are rooted in the bonds we forge while fighting for what we believe in. The tumultuous waves of the ocean roared against the cliffs, and he understood that behind the storm lies the promise of freedom, a promise he and his neighbors would continue to uphold together. In this journey, he discovered the profound truth that fighting for one's home, one's dreams, was never a solitary journey, It became an anthem for all who dared to pursue their vision of life truly lived.